Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Goin Digital Show, the podcast for K-12 school leaders. I'm your host, Greg Goins, a K-12 superintendent in the state of Illinois, and this is episode number 11, Digital Learning in Education. In this episode, we're going to hear from some truly innovative school leaders who will share great ideas and best practices on how you can create your very own school of innovation. I want to give a big hello to those watching live on the TeachCal Broadcasting Network at teachcal.com. If you want to participate in the live broadcast, just use the EduLive hashtag. You can find great live education content every Tuesday and Wednesday night at the TeachCal website. You can also find the Goin Digital Show now on iTunes, where we've recently been recognized as a new and noteworthy podcast on the iTunes platform. So thanks to our loyal listeners for their continued support. So let's go ahead and kick things off and introduce our very special guest. Very excited about the show tonight. We have Bobby Dodd, a high school principal in Ohio, who's just been named a 2016 Digital Principal Award winner by the NASSP. Jerry Kimball is an assistant superintendent in Kansas, who's been recognized by eSchool News as a top 10 tech-savvy superintendent. We also have two innovative school superintendents. Chris Goins is a leader not only in his state of Missouri, but also a leader with the AASA, the National Superintendent Association, and Chris is in the planning stages of opening a School of Innovation in his school district in the St. Louis area for 2017. And we also have Tim Bobrowski, a superintendent who leads a district of innovation in his home state of Kentucky, and his district is the only one in Kentucky to be a member of the Digital Promise League of Innovative Schools, and we're looking forward to learning a little bit more about what that means tonight. So welcome to all of our guests tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could, let's just go around the horn, and if you could, tell us a little bit about your educational background and maybe tell us a little bit about your school district, and we'll start with Jerry Kimball.
I have been in education for over 30 years. I was one of those teachers that came up through the ranks in the classroom for 13 years. Then I was counselor for 5 years. Then I was a principal, superintendent in a very small district. And when I was in that district, I had a very unique job. I was K-12 principal, superintendent, and started a virtual school. And left that to come to Lawrence to be assistant superintendent of educational programs and technology. Just opened a college and career center, and we are heavily blended learning. And exciting times looking at perhaps going one-to-one.
Very good. Let's go to Bobby Dodd.
Yeah, as stated, my name is Bobby Dodd. I'm the principal at Gahanna Lincoln High School in Gahanna, Ohio. It's a suburb of Columbus. My educational background, I was a technology teacher, tech ed teacher, so I taught different classes from networking to information support systems all the way to engineering design. We were a PLTW school when I was a teacher, and so I carried that into my administration career as I've been pretty heavy on technology and using innovation in different schools where I've been in order to get us increase throughout our schools. So that goes all the way from having digital academies to going one-to-one with iPads. We've done different things where I've been. I've been in education for over 13 years, and I enjoy it. It's something that I love. A little bit about my district. I'm principal at Gahanna Lincoln, as I said earlier, and the district I'm in is called Gahanna Jefferson. It's a district of about 7,000 students, and our high school has about 2,500 kids in it. It's a very large high school. It is the largest high school in the Central Ohio area, and we pride ourselves on a lot of diversity involving our culture of our students and also all the offerings that we offer our kids, all the way from a fabrication lab to a digital academy, as I said earlier.
Very good. Let's go to Chris Goins.
Well, good evening. I started out as a math and science teacher and then a high school principal, and for the last 15 years been serving as a superintendent in Missouri and in a few districts, but started in July here in Melville School District. We're a district in south part of St. Louis County with just over 10,000 kids. where our high schools are mostly one-to-one, not quite completely there yet. We'll finish that out next year, and we've got about 30% free and reduced lunch, but a significant ELL population as well.
Very good. Tim Bobrowski.
I'm 25 years in. This is completing my 25th year here in June, so I've been around for a tad. Getting ready to engage in a district-wide one-to-one take-home initiative starting in the fall of 2016-17. So we're in the process of making that transition and shift. A little demographics. Owsley County, Kentucky is one of the poorest counties in the nation. We're not proud of that. That's the cards we're dealt. That's how we roll, and that's how we deal with things. But I want to make sure that our kids have every opportunity available to them as other kids in other areas. So we're very firm in that foundation and belief as my team works towards meeting the challenges of the 21st century world that our kids live in. So we do those things all the way from having to deal with budget cuts in Kentucky, like I'm sure a lot of the other superintendents do. It's very taxing, to say the least, on small districts who are students and who live in a very impoverished area. So that's the challenges that I have, and we always try to make sure they're successful when they leave our school district.
Good, very good. Well, welcome to you all. I'm so glad to have you here. And you know, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is this idea of innovative schools. And we hear that term a lot, but we don't really dive in and kind of define that. I have been able to talk with Ted Dintersmith a great deal over the last several months, and Ted is the executive producer of the Most Likely to Succeed documentary. And I just asked him recently, I said, Ted, how do you define innovation? And he said, you know what, it's not something you can define, but you know it when you see it. So I guess my question to the four of you would be, can you define innovation in your school district? What does it look like, and what are some of the things you're doing that you feel are highly innovative in your school? And Bobby, let's start with you.
Well, when it comes to innovation, at least at Hannah Lincoln, we don't usually try to define it. What we do is we focus on student growth and student need. And so we look at that, we gather data from our students, from our parents, our community, our staff members. We figure out what we need, and then we try to figure out how we're going to do it. So a good example of that is our fabrication lab. So we saw a need there where we needed to increase our offerings in engineering and increase the opportunities for our kids to show creativity and growth. And we wanted to take it a step past basically a maker space. And so what we did was we ended up getting the equipment, turning it into a static lab, and then what we have now is basically a graphic design department and a business operating inside of our school, operated by our kids, and we have a teacher obviously that oversees that. So we saw a need, and we went and addressed it the best way that we could. And then something that it was pretty neat that happened was a graduating class from our school ended up making a large donation to this program, enable them to buy more equipment they needed in order to make the business roll even better than it was. So when it comes to innovation, we always base it on student need and then focus on student growth. We combine those two things, and then what happens from that is what happens. And if it fails, we look at it, we try to maybe tinker with it a little bit, make it better, and learn from those mistakes, and then we can move the program forward.
Good, very good. And Tim, at least in the state of Kentucky, your state has defined innovation through your application process for districts of innovation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay. Kentucky, through our past commissioners, have indicated the need for districts of innovation. Through an application process, you apply for certification to get this designation. This designation, and I've had a lot of great folks, but it's something that we do because in our district we have a lot of challenges. So we look at challenges, how we address those challenges, innovative. And we may solve a problem differently than what another district may, but we're innovative in how we solve it. Our conditions here within our district. So through that application process, the comes in and they're very friendly with us. They're very friendly with us. But it kind of we have 7 districts in the state of Kentucky now. So we're one of those 11 district of innovation. So what it really does is allows us to bend the rules without breaking them. But it also allows us to take the Department of Education's knowledge go about doing what needs to be done for arts. So we focus a lot on our classrooms for students, individual focus. We've developed a virtual school. One of our biggest things is our non-traditional, which during the past week and a half, we've had 20 inches of snow here in Kentucky, and in Owsley County. So obviously schools are shut down during that time period, but we continue to go to school. And now actually through some extra work we've done is we can actually feed kids on those days, which something that in our area with the high poverty levels, and we have 89% of our students on free and reduced lunch. So we know those kids and those families need nutrients and need to eat as much as often as possible. But this last storm came in at the last of the month, and when you deal with a lot of individuals that are waiting on check to check, so to speak, we know a lot of our kids were hungry. So we've enabled our food service staff and other folks to work during those days to feed meals. So then our school gets reimbursed for those meals that we serve. So over 7 days, I think we've served approximately 120 per day, which is pretty good for our size district, which is of about 735. So it's a starting work in progress, but we've really reached out to our community resource centers and folks, churches and so forth, where we'll serve the meals to kids, because we take it to their communities. We don't have them come to our schools unless we're open, and that's been a neat little project that we've worked on for the last 5 years. So in Kentucky, we were one of the 2 that started this, but now there are 44 other districts in the state that are using these non-traditional instructional days to have school when you traditionally wouldn't have school.
Okay, very good. Jerry, you want to talk a little bit about what you've done as not only a superintendent, but in your role now as assistant superintendent?
Sure. I'll start when I was superintendent. I was in a very small school district. It was literally in the middle of a field. And we had students there that wanted to take classes that we didn't work. And so what I saw as a great opportunity was virtual school. So we started the Kansas Online Learning Program, and immediately it opened 250 class offerings that we did not have prior to that, and we could have kids taking all kinds of classes online, and it really expanded their curriculum. I didn't want the zip code to determine the number of classes that they could choose from or the quality of classes that they. So that's really important. Today, I'm really involved in some great things here in Lawrence. First of all, our community passed a bond issue for $92 million, and we are redesigning many of our spaces, K-12. Our elementary schools were all in need of a redesign and an upgrade, so we have created those 21st century learning spaces. We have maker spaces in the libraries. We have the learning pockets. We don't buy desks anymore. All of the furniture is flexible and movable, and so we're really trying to create that new kind of space. Also, we opened this fall the College and Career Center, and we have design thinking classes there, maker spaces. We also have classes so students can earn certificates and walk out with maybe a certificate in in a medical area or something like that. So when they graduate, they are career ready. So those are some of the fun things that we're doing here to be innovative.
Very good. Chris?
Well, as I listen to everybody, I've been trying to think about how we might define what innovation is. And as I listen to folks, I think innovation is different to everybody, and it's different in every place. But I think it really boils down to when you start doing things differently than what folks are used to in order to meet the needs of your kids and your community. You know, your community in the way Tim's doing, and, you know, kids in the way that Bobby and Jerry are doing. You know, I can think back to, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago when we outsourced technology services in a district, and people thought that was the craziest thing, you know, but, you know, years later, still doing it in that district has been incredibly successful, and they're one-to-one now. You know, for us in Melville, at least the conversation right now is really around the school that we're looking to open in 2017-18 school year, and we're shuffling a bunch of resources around, moving things from here and there to work within our existing footprint to not only be able to open this kind of innovative elementary school of choice based around personalized learning, based around problem-based learning, you know, proficiency components within it. It will be a school of choice with no attendance boundaries, you know, lottery basis for our kids to come. But we'll also be able to expand early childhood opportunities as part of that altogether. So a lot of people are saying, oh, your new school sounds nice and cool, but it's just really one component of an overall plan that we're looking at to better serve the needs of our kids in our community.
Very good. And I think everyone here tonight is in some type of one-to-one program, or at least trying to finish that off. In my district, we're BYOD. We are one-to-one with iPads in our K2 building and our 3-6 building, but our junior high and high school have really kind of gravitated toward a BYOD concept. So I guess my question to all of you as digital leaders is, if there are superintendents or principals out there that are wanting to start a one-to-one program, what advice do you have for them, and kind of share some of the challenges and some of the bumps in the road that maybe some of you have encountered along the way? Jerry, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Oh, well, I'm right in the midst of all of that right now, and I think the first aha moment I had, I did focus groups at the high schools to visit with students. We set up a device check system. We have a BYOD policy, but we knew that some students did not have a device or internet, and that's an area that really working hard finding a way to get them internet access at home. So we do check out Kajits, which are little hotspots, and we do check out devices. But my aha moment was when several people said, why don't you just poll all the kids in school and say, do you have a device? Do you have internet? And that's your answer. Found out that really is not the answer. A lot of students said, yes, we have a device at home and we have internet. There's 5 of us in the family and the device belongs to my dad. We can't get on it. And so really they did not have access. So that became a stick that I really felt like we needed to go deeper with and find out from the students how many do have access and who doesn't. We do have a waiting list on our Kajits. Kids are always wanting to check those out, so it's keep up with that. The other piece that I think is probably the toughest piece, getting the devices is not the toughest part, it's that professional development. And really viewing the device as not just a teaching tool, but a learning tool for the students. And how do we change that pedagogy, and how do we move that switch with staff? And it's tough to do I think in a larger district. It's like turning the cruise ship instead of turning the speedboat. So those are two of the that we're really focused on now, making sure kids have access and professional development.
Great. Bobby, what's your one-to-one experience been like?
Well, I tell you, I'll touch on a couple of things that Jerry just said. So I think it's always boils down to four things when it comes to one-to-one. Now, two of them she mentioned, PD with the staff. So when it came to professional development, we made sure our staff members had their devices a year in advance before the students did. And so what the staff members were able to do, were able to utilize those devices in the classroom without the students having them yet. And so they incorporated into their teaching, into their instruction. And then once the students had the devices, it made the transition a lot easier for the staff members. I would say another thing, and just like Jerry said, I always told my staff, don't let the tools guide the teaching. Let the teaching and the instruction guide what tool you're going to use. So I always told teachers, hey, listen, it's about student growth. It's about you being the best instructor you can be. If you need chalk, I'll get you as much chalk as you need. So if you want to use the iPad, use the iPad. So I didn't have a culture based on, hey, we're one-to-one. You have to use the iPads. When I come in, I better see it used. It was based on, let's have student growth. Let's use our best instructional practices that we can. If you need to use a tool on a certain day at a certain time, that's good. But use the resources appropriately. Let your teaching guide what tools you use. So something else I'll touch on is I always focused on communication. It was huge. So before we did the rollout, we figured out how we were going to roll it out. We figured out what we were going to tell our parents, why we needed the devices, why we needed the tools and the resources to help student growth. So we focused on communication. We continued the first 2 years on communicating with the community, communicating with the parents, why we were using them, how we were going to use them, and then also our expectations. So we always made it crystal clear what we expected our students to do and parents on their end, and then what we expected our teachers to do on their end. So I think, building off a couple of things Jerry said and then those few things, I think that's a solid foundation if you're going to start a one-to-one and roll it out, and that'll get you going. And then basically what you can do is learn from other schools at this point in time. Since schools have been doing it, districts have been doing it, it's really good to learn and kind of pick up things from them and then maybe fine-tune it for your district and your building.
I think that's great advice. Chris, what's your experience been like with one-to-one?
Well, I inherited one-to-one here in Melville. Not complete at the high schools due to some budget concerns, but we'll finish that out next year. But talk a little bit though about the district that I just left, and we were on a march in a digital conversion there, and really ours was centered around kind of what's been mentioned, and that is, one is capacity building, and that's capacity of their physical environment and enhancing your wireless so that your building has the capacity to do it, you have the bandwidth to do it. And we were doing that through launching BYOD first, really at our high schools, and making sure we had that. And we were starting to roll out devices in kind of piecemeal fashion a little bit. But it was not only the capacity building of our structures, but it was capacity building in our staff, which has been mentioned. We spent a lot of time working with our teachers to ensure that this, and we really approached this from, this is not a technology initiative. This is an instructional initiative. And we're going to use these tools to help improve instruction for our kids and not just get the new shiny thing that we can throw on a desk. So I think capacity building and approaching it from an instructional standpoint rather than a technology standpoint are the two key elements to me.
Well, very good. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what's been said up to this point with the capacity building and the professional development especially. But I think one thing that we have done in our district that's similar is, again, each district's got its own strength, it's got its own weaknesses. And I think as leaders we have to identify which is which so that we know, A, that we can build upon our strengths and then minimize our weaknesses. And I think a strength that we have in our district is we're a gigabit community, which just means we've got fiber to the home for our kids. The problem we were running into is we still have got some kids, even though they've got fiber to the home, they don't have access or they don't connect. So when we were looking at devices, because we're thinking 24/7 learning opportunities for kids, we're developing and have developed a one-to-one digital anytime, anywhere learning platform and plan, so that whenever kids can take devices home, they may not necessarily have to have the internet. What we learned with our Google Chromebooks too is that they don't always have to have the internet for them to complete their assignments and work on. So we did a lot of homework before we just jumped in and decided on a device to make sure that it truly fit the needs of our kids in our district, because I thought that was one of the first things we needed for success. Now, we've been a BYOD district since I've been here, which is going on 5 years. So, seeing kids, 5 years ago, you got to remember, 5 years ago, kids talking on phones at school was a no-no. It was something you weren't supposed to do. And now we just realized that we couldn't police that. We couldn't control that anymore. And instead of fighting that battle that we knew we couldn't win, we just decided to say, listen, let's embrace the technology that kids are using, but let's spin that and turn it so that it's a learning opportunity for them as well as a teaching opportunity for our teachers to really embed the use of technology in their classrooms. So we've done those things, but I would agree heavily with what's been said about the professional development. I mean, you really can't emphasize that enough, but I think it has to be personalized professional development. Sometimes teachers are at different, just like in the classroom, some kids are at a different level than others may be, and we have to accommodate that individually so that when we do PD, we can break that out accordingly. So.
Very good. I want to ask a specific question to each of the four of you based on just the research that I've been able to do in preparation for the show, but you're all doing fantastic things in your district. And Chris, I want to start with you. This idea of creating a new school of innovation is very fascinating for me. Where did that idea come from? And I mean, that sounds very overwhelming to me. So can you kind of walk us through your mindset as you try to start that, and maybe share some of the conversations you're having with people in your community about this type of school?
Well, let me start by saying I'm just a thief, and I stole the idea from somebody else. So when I came to Melville in July, we were facing a budget crisis, which I knew that coming in, but thanks to our community and our parents and voters, we passed a sizable tax increase in November by almost 73% approval. So that was able to relieve a lot of pressure moving forward. But we were really looking around the strategic plan that the board had just adopted, especially in the area of student preparation. And we knew that we were, in most instances, offering a pretty good traditional education, kind of the one size fits most. For most kids, we were doing okay. But at the high school, we have two alternative schools. So one has got a virtual component to it. It's a choice. The other one's more kind of disciplinary. So we know that we weren't meeting the needs of the kids, and those kids became disengaged well before high school. So as we started kind of looking around at what we could do, we wanted to see what we could do at an elementary level at the beginning to keep kids excited about school. So really through just folks I knew in Missouri and luckily kind of across the country, we knew there were some things that were going on that were a little bit different. So we really are modeling the elementary at first around Epic Elementary in Liberty, Missouri. That's really kind of where the idea came from. They were the first to do it in Missouri. There's I think another one now in Missouri. Another one is going to be opening in next school year. But we'll be the first in the St. Louis region to do this type of thing. So that's kind of what's kind of got the region talking a little bit. And for our parents especially, because Melville has been a very traditional, very conservative district, not doing a lot of new things. So people are really excited that we're looking at doing something a little bit different for kids, and that we'll have some different opportunities for kids. But also, that, like I said earlier, is just a piece of a larger puzzle in our strategic plan. So, you know, we're looking at doing some project-based learning things in our middle schools. We're looking at schools within schools and academies in our high schools. Well, there are only 4 high schools in our region that have all the Project Lead the Way items. We've got 2 of those 4. We've got our board just last week approved expanding Project Lead the Way even more in our middle schools, and we're looking at launch in our elementaries. So, you know, we're just trying to be out there offering the best things that we can for the kids that we serve.
Very good. And Tim, I want to jump to you. As one of the early adopters of this School of Innovation approach in Kentucky, my guess would be you're a model school for the state. You have a lot of folks that want to come visit. And when you have those people on site, what are some of the questions that they're asking you, and what are some of the things they're concerned about? And kind of tell us, if we come to visit one of your schools, what it would look like, and what are some of the questions that you might be able to answer for us?
We get, you know, visitors throughout the year, and it's visitors come in with a lot of different reasons. We have so many things going on. Sometimes folks don't just come to say, "Oh, you're a district of innovation. We want to see what you're doing." They may want to come and see kind of our farm to cafeteria program, or they may want to come and see how we're working our arts and humanities kind of program. You know, it's got almost to where it's specific when people come in to ask questions now about our little district. But I think the kind of questions they ask is, how do you, as a superintendent, financially do what you're doing? Because they know of the challenges and they know of the things that we do. That's a question that I get a lot. Because when you're always having to cut, you know, how do you afford to do these things? But I think that goes back to the definition of innovation. I mean, you've got to think differently, and you've got to embrace yourself with good folks who can help you make decisions. I think that's a life lesson that we've all picked up at some point. But when they come in and look, maybe they're wanting to know more about our early college option that we have for grades 10 through 12. You know, where we can individualize learning or personalize it so that kids that's ready to go and who've benchmarked, they're ready to jump in and start taking classes. You know, we have a lot of different parts or pieces to the puzzle, and we just don't get somebody coming in and look at the whole thing. They usually come in wanting to know more specifically about one particular aspect of our innovation. Questions that we get asked a lot would be the connectivity, the speed, what do kids have when they go home, knowing their environmental circumstances and situations. You know, how do we handle that? What's our expectation in terms of you know, 24/7 learning? What's that mean? What's it look like in a school district where we're going to school but no one's physically sitting in the seats? You know, that concept goes a long way, but when you think about it realistically, think about a high school student. When our kids or when our teachers are checking the kids' work, you know, they don't start checking at 8 o'clock and go to 3 o'clock. Their world doesn't exist in that time frame as we sometimes think that it does. Their world starts on a snow day when they get up, and unfortunately that's around 12 o'clock. Doesn't matter to us. We don't care what time they get up. We don't care if they're working on it at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Whatever works best for that kid and that teacher who's willing to do that on that time, whether it be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whatever day of the week, it's not relevant to us. What's relevant is the kids are completing assignments on their level at their time, not on ours.
Oh, very good, and that's a fascinating approach, and I'm sure you have a lot of folks that want to come see all 4 of your schools probably. I'm sure you have visitors that want to see what you're doing, in terms of innovation. And Bobby, I want to jump to you. If one of my principals came to me as a superintendent and said, you know what, I want to create a digital learning academy, first my eyes would get really big. I'd probably get excited. But then my next question would be, what does that mean exactly, and how are we going to pay for it? That's a typical superintendent question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so what I usually try to do is have those bases covered. So when it comes to something like that, I try to look at the funding and look and see where we can pull it from and how we can save money for the district. And so a good example is trying to find what we're spending on maybe credit recovery services for students that are at risk of graduating, and then maybe trying to allocate those funds differently and set it up in an academy where we can get kids in an environment that maybe that they weren't in before, that they weren't successful in before. Let's put them in a different environment so we can see maybe if they're successful and kind of like we've talked about earlier, personalizing their education. So really breaking it down and letting them do some things differently. So I try to take space that we already have, try to use furniture that we already have, and then try to find some type of digital devices that we have, and then work with a company, whether if we're going to provide the curriculum for our students or if I'm going to go with a company to provide the software and the curriculum. We try to do it that way the best we can. So yeah, when the superintendent, it's that conversation always, hey, it's a great idea, tell me how it's going to work, and tell me if it's going to cost me, if we're going to save money. And I always try to go with that effect of saving money, so I can always get a yes. So that's kind of how I base it. I've done it a couple times, and I've always just tried to focus on, how are we going to do it and make it the most cost efficient that we can. Use what we already have in place, so use the staff members, and then bring our kids in who are going to benefit the most from the program.
Very good. And Jerry, when we first connected on Twitter, one of the things that I found fascinating about you is the work you've been able to do throughout your career with online learning and the virtual school that you created as a superintendent in Kansas. I mean, you created basically a platform for every student in the state of Kansas. So can you kind of talk about that experience a little bit?
I have loved my education experience, and I think for many reasons. First of all, we serve those students that for some reason are not being served in a brick and mortar building. It could be their health, it could be that they're bullied, it could be social reasons. There's so many reasons that they come to virtual school, but it is so fulfilling to know that you can serve those students wherever they are. The virtual school in Lawrence has 1,200 students in it, and we serve students all over the state of Kansas. We have a National Honor Society. We have a prom. One of the interesting things that I was a couple of years ago, the president of our student council could not make it to prom, so we took one of those, have you seen those robots that have an iPad and they roll around?
Yes.
So she had one of those robots at prom with a feather boa around her neck, out on the dance floor dancing, rolled up to tables and played cards, and so we made sure that she had a really quality experience even though she couldn't be there. A couple of things that I find interesting is that sometimes I know more about my virtual students than brick and mortar students because the communication is very different and we are communicating constantly, text messaging, parents, Skype, just all kinds of ways that you communicate with them. And people think that relationships would be really tough in a virtual setting, but they are not. One of my pleasures is to go on Friday morning and hear the all-school assembly over the virtual school that's going on over the whole state of Kansas, or the faculty meeting where we have some faculty that live in New York, some in Kansas, but we're all working together to serve students. And I think it will really help our brick and mortar college expand what personalized learning looks like, because virtual really set out to do for students, and in a way, we may be just a little bit ahead of the curve there. And always hope that our virtual teachers will share their experience and how they engage students with the brick and mortar teachers, because like you were saying, having school on a snow day, I think that is phenomenal. That is a great idea. And so how do we engage those kids that way? It's very exciting.
And you know, one of the things that we all have to deal with as school leaders is the fact that technology changes so quickly. I mean, it's very difficult to, to stay current and try to use those best practices in your school leadership role. So I guess my question to all four of you would be, how do you really plan for the unknown, and how do you measure success when you walk around your classrooms and you watch kids and teachers using technology? How do you know that you're on the right track? Who wants to start?
Our student engagement really lets us know if we're on the right track. Are students engaged in the learning, and are they personalized and learning the way that they learned best? And then as how do you plan for that unexpected? I think the most important thing that we can have as leaders is that growth mindset, making sure that we are always open to new ideas and fostering that kind of thinking instead of the fixed mindset thinking.
Very good. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what she just is referring to. I think we always have to look at what's best for kids, and I know it's kind of a cliche that we always talk about, but sometimes if you know what's going on, sometimes it's not really observable. I think we all have got an intuition that's embedded in us somewhere at some point in time that says either A, I've got to pick it up because I know our kids aren't getting what they need, or B, I feel really good right now at this point based on what I'm seeing. So the data that I would refer to as evidence would be the frequency and the usage, as well as what the kids are learning, and as much as the teachers are using it. Because when you engage in this kind of activity, I mean, you have to have the high expectation that individuals, adults, are going to do what they're supposed to do. And we all know in different parts of public education that, sometimes we have to stay on to folks to get them to do what we feel like is the best for them to do. But the biggest motivator is the kids. If teachers try to keep up with kids, they often find themselves behind. And what was alluded to earlier is, it was giving the devices out. The teachers have to have the professional development and opportunity to make sure they're well prepared in the delivery. If they feel comfortable, then the kids are going to feel more comfortable when the teacher unleashes that. So when you walk into a classroom, and when I walk into there, at the beginning of the next school year, we're going to have grades 3 through 10 with our Chromebooks, and I'm still trying to work out the piece on grades 11 and 12. But I only have so much money, so I can only do so much. But when you see students engaged in those classrooms and teachers engaged at the same level that the students are at or better, I think then good things are going on. So I think it's a kind of a long answer, but I think the student engagement piece, when you see that going on and you look at the data, whether it be the reports that you get each month on who's using what and how frequently they're using those devices, and the learning that occurs from that, I think that's what you want to see.
Great. What are your thoughts, Chris?
So I would agree with what Tim just said, but I'd add around not just frequency of use, but how they're using them. Are we using Google Docs just to take notes in class, or are we actually using it to explore and really get inquiry-based and going a little bit deeper? What kind of depth of knowledge levels are we looking at? But I kind of think about your other question on how do you deal with a rapidly changing landscape? And our longtime director of technology just retired. Actually, last Friday was his last day. And so we spent a little time yesterday and today taking a look at candidates, and we kind of asked them that question. How do you keep up? How do you make sure that your kids aren't 5-10 years behind? And so we try to work as much as we can in knowing what's coming, what we see out there in business and industry, with some connections that we have there, but also being really mindful around replenishment schedules and budgets, and what are you going to do in terms of refreshes? Because if we've really built capacity in our staff, the device, we should be device fairly agnostic, and we should be able to do across platforms, I think, at least.
Bobby?
I always looked at it, and these couple of these things have already been mentioned, but I always look at it like five areas, because I got asked this a lot, like how do we know, or how do you know it's going to be successful? So we talked about engagement, talked about student growth. One thing I always liked was, were students, were staff using the tools, and was there excitement? So I would always remember when my first few weeks when we went one-to-one, I could go up in the hallways and I would see students in science classes doing experiments, using video, doing screencasts with different types of apps, and then being able to have a discussion with me or conversation on what they were doing, why they were doing it, and how they were going to go share it with their classmates. To me, that led to comprehension, and that was always big. Is if you're going to use the tools, you're going to use the resources, I want to make sure that students are comprehending what they're doing and why they're using it. And to me, the final thing was it's always about the little things. And having a daughter that was in school that went through the one-to-one program, I'll never forget when she was able to help someone else in the community, just grabbing the device that they used and being able to figure out how to get to print on Google. You know, back a few years ago, that was tough to do, trying to grab an iPad and being able to print through air. And seeing our kids being able to do that was able to show me that our kids are going out, can go to college, can go out in the job, can be handed any type of device, maybe use any type of learning management system, and be comfortable and be efficient. And to me, that always put them a step ahead from another district that weren't giving their students those type of capabilities or resources to use.
And Bobby, I think that's a great segue into my next thought, which would be kind of thinking about the college and career readiness part of what we do as educators. I think all of us have either worked in a high school environment or have a high school in your district currently. So when you think about teaching high school kids those soft skills or even those digital skills that they need to go out and be successful either at the college level or in the job market, you know, what's your thought process, and how do you really measure if those kids are ready when they leave you? Tim, what do you think?
I think, you know, in Kentucky, of course, I don't know how it is in other states, but in Kentucky, you know, we're kind of, as an accountability system, you know, college and career ready is a percentage of kids that are leaving your district that are deemed that way by the state, meeting certain criteria. So our rates are relatively good. I mean, I feel good about our college and career readiness numbers. And you know, when I first started 5 years ago, we were at 9%, and we're at 79% at this point. So just in comparing numbers, you know, we really came a long way. And again, I've had a lot of great staff members to help and assist in getting our kids there, because we believe, you know, sometimes it's not all about the curriculum piece of it, but it's preparing kids for their future. And the curriculum piece is just a part of that, but it's not the only part. And I think as we look at that, you know, the college career options that we're offering kids now, you know, when we have our first kid that graduated high school but also received her Associates of Arts degree on the same day from one of our community colleges that are close by, you know, to me, that kid she's already starting her sophomore year, her first year out of high school, and moving forward. And it's hard to believe, but she's going to be graduating this spring, you know, from college, and she's 2 years out of high school. So I mean, it's just that mindset is how fast things move. But she was a kid that really was able to take care of her personal needs, wants, and desires. But we availed ourselves and her thinking towards that so that she could get ready. So I think it's looking at things a little differently. but yet at the same point, it's making sure kids are college and career ready. Now, the career part is again, it has its own set of challenges in an area that doesn't have a lot of industry. How do you fix that? So there's always a challenge out there, and sometimes I think as superintendents, we're put in these positions that overcome the challenges that we have. I'll say that, hush.
And Illinois is kind of in the same boat with Kentucky and other schools in the Midwest that have really kind of gravitated toward this dual credit concept. And we're in the same situation in which we have students graduate from high school on Friday night from the local community college on Saturday, and that's just such a great opportunity for those kids. Jerry, you want to talk about Kansas a little bit?
Yeah, this question has really been on the forefront in Kansas. We have a new Commissioner of Education, Dr. Ranson, and when he came in as commissioner, he went around the state and he asked people, what is it that a successful 20-year-old Kansan looks like? Because graduation isn't the end of the line, graduation from high school. That's just the beginning. So what is it that successful looks like? And the results were interesting because business industry was what we really need are those people that have those soft skills that can be respond, show up on time. We can really teach them what they need to know, but we would like the schools to step in and help with those soft skills. So I was on his redesign committee, and we did some research to this. And in my district, we use a that can measure those skills. We have a wide intervention program that we use is out of the University of Kansas, and it's called CIP. But we actually measure and students are doing, how the skills are coming along, see students that interventions and counselors can step in, right? So this helps digital citizenship, and also the research proves that if you can work with them and emotionally stable students, academics will go up 11%. I think sometimes we overlook or gloss over character education and some of that skill building. And so this is an area that we really have into, and I'm excited because many times you hear you can't measure those soft skills, but you can, and you can keep track of that and help build those skills that will really make the kids successful career and college ready.
And Bobby, what's college and career readiness look like in Ohio?
Well, like other, we do focus on college credit plus, which is our doing for students, so they can take those classes in high school and then further their education in college. But I think at Gahanna, what we do is, when it comes to those soft skills, we take that very, very seriously. And one part I like about it, as a graduation requirement, you have to take a speech class in order to graduate. And in our English department, we have some of the best speech teachers, I feel, in the state. So our students have to be able to speak publicly, or else you can't graduate. And that's something that I think some schools have gone away from, but I believe that's very strong to have those soft skills. Also, a lot of our offerings include theater, band, choir, orchestra, a lot of the performing arts students get involved in our school. And I think that brings out soft skills and move us to communicate with each other and build relationships and collaborate, which I think prepares them for college. So it's not so much really based on technology, but it's based on those offerings that we have at our school. Again, when it comes to those soft skills, I can't believe the amount of presentations that our students have to do in different classes. Whether I'm walking into a math class, social studies class, we have students that are using all different types of learning management software, whether it's Google Classroom, Schoology, Edmodo, and what they're doing is these teachers, I said earlier, taking blended learning and making it just basically a form of learning. So students may be working together as a team, but eventually they're going to have to present that to the rest of the class. And I think that addresses the soft skills very well. So I'm confident when our students go out into a job, into an interview, go into college, that not only do they have those tech skills, which are very important, but also those soft skills that I think that can make them or put them a step ahead of other people they're competing against.
Chris, what's your thoughts on the college and career readiness piece?
Well, I would echo what's been said. I find it intriguing that we start off, a lot of us, with kids in kindergarten and first grade in a standards-based grading model where we measure those kinds of things and report those to parents in early grades, but we phase that out over time as the kids get older. But I think it's the Lee Summit School District there in suburban Kansas City that started doing I think they call it an employability report card as part of what they do in high school. But I would really kind of ask people to take a look at what David Schuler at District 214 in suburban Chicago. He's also the ASA president right now. But they're launching a new initiative around redefining what it means to be college ready, career ready, and life ready. And one of the key elements is exactly what Bobby just mentioned, and that is involvement in extracurricular activities as a piece of that, because it helps you learn how to work and be a member of a team, and that's something that we're going to have to do as kids graduate and move on to whatever they're going to move on to, which for us is why we're really making a push towards problem-based and project-based learning, so that kids have to work in teams. They do the presentation things that Bobby's talking about, all of that, so they're not just kids who have a high GPA and can go off to college, but they have some skills that employers really are looking for.
Very good, and all four of you are providing tremendous insight. So if you're a superintendent or a principal or maybe a tech coordinator in your building and you're looking for some innovative ideas to roll out in your district, you certainly want to connect with these four individuals doing amazing things in all their school districts. The time really flies by when we get engaged in these type of conversations. So as we wrap it up tonight, let's just go around the horn one more time and just give us your closing thoughts on digital learning in K-12 education, and if there's anything else that you want to add for tonight, Tim, maybe you can talk a little bit about digital promise, and we'll just go around from there. So Tim, let's start with you.
Digital promise, I kind of ran across that organization inadvertently, but it's been a true blessing to be involved with. If you've not done any research on it, I would encourage you to go out and look to see what the organization's about. Again, it's an application process, but it is a federal initiative from bipartisan support, which is a good thing now that election time is starting to heat up. But it's very good in the sense that the support mechanisms are there, as well as being associated with other superintendents and other school leaders about how they're doing innovative things in their district, and it does look different as we go back to the original conversation. Innovation is different based on needs, wants, desires, and so forth, and resources. So the digital promise has been good for me to be a part of, and I'm very thankful that we're part of that group, because they're very innovative in the way they think, they act, they do things, and it's good to have conversations with those kind of folks. As a superintendent, we're on our own little island sometimes, but it is good to be able to reach out and talk with individuals about what's going on good in their schools and communities, like this group has been tonight. So I thank you for that.
Great. Jerry?
I have to say, last November, a year ago, I was honored to get to go to the White House for the Future Ready rollout with the president. And when I went to Washington, D.C., I thought, oh, I bet that they don't really get what's going on in schools. And I left so overwhelmed with all of the good things that are happening and the things that they are pushing out for us. I would encourage them to take a look at the Future Ready site, to look at what the department is doing for schools across the nation. They have some great resources there. Any district could pull up towards all kinds of things. And through that experience, now we are working with them for online educational resources. We have a team of teach special assignment that help assist our blended teachers, and they also help curate content. A lot of it is the open educational resources so that we can hopefully decrease the amount of money that we spend on those textbooks that are already added when they hit our front door. So they are looking for more districts to be involved in ORs, and they are giving some assistance with that. So that is an area that I would encourage people to go to. They have done so much work. They are just great leaders, and I have been really impressed with the work that they've done for schools across the nation.
Very good. Chris?
Well, I'm thinking back to when Bobby talked about going to his superintendent and asking, for something. So I think it's imperative that principals ask. When they have an idea, you've got to ask. And then for folks like Tim and I, who are superintendents, and Jerry, who used to be one and now is in central office, I think we've got to allow people the freedom to take risks, and sometimes we have to say yes. We've got to get away from saying no all the time, and we've got to say yes. Give people permission to take some risks, and perhaps they do fail forward in a safe manner. But this traditional model, one size fits most, isn't working for every kid. So we need to try some new things, and we need to give people some freedom to do that, and sometimes just not get so carried up and worried and just all Twitter-pated about state test scores.
Yep.
Very well said. Bobby, we'll close with you.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for letting me be on here with these esteemed colleagues of mine and people that are out in forefront of technology. I kind of want to build off that, and I always think about a George Kiros quote that talks about questioning what we do and why we do it is essential to innovation. So as I continue to help many administrators throughout the country get more involved with technology, be more of a digital leader, I always go back to that and think, kind of like what we talked about tonight, is focusing on student growth, focusing on using different types of resources, and really being able to take that next step and take that risk and try something different, to be innovative, because down the road it's probably going to help your kids and help your school and help your community.
Well, and again, very well said by all of you. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation. If you missed us live tonight, be sure to check us out on iTunes. It should be available here very shortly after the show tonight. And again, if you're a superintendent or a principal in your school district, please reach out to these guests tonight and to myself. If we can help you in any way, we certainly want to do that. And Tim and Chris, you guys are close enough to me here in Illinois that I can actually make an on-site visit. So be looking for me in a school district soon. So wonderful, wonderful. Well, with that, we want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight on the Goin Digital Show. And we're going to sign off, and we will see you in a couple weeks. So have a great night on behalf of the Teach Cal Network and the Goin Digital Show. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye.